What happens when a grieving war veteran faces injustice in the most sacred of places, his wife's gravesite? This is a powerful story of loss, unexpected confrontation, and the unbreakable bond of brotherhood that fights for justice and healing. If you believe in stories that inspire and remind us of our shared humanity, make sure to subscribe and join us for more powerful tales of courage and resilience. John Harrington stood motionless in the early morning chill, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp autumn air. Around him, the cemetery lay quiet, the bare branches of ancient oaks swaying gently as the first golden rays of sunlight sifted through the leaves. The freshly turned earth in front of him marked the grave of Elizabeth, his wife of nearly 5 decades. The coffin had just been lowered hours ago, and the small mound of soil was still soft, raw, like the wound that tore through his heart. His eyes, once sharp and clear like a soldier's should be, were now clouded with sorrow. The silence felt heavy, oppressive as memories flooded back, her laugh, the warmth of her hand in his, the way she would call his name with a soft smile. All gone, stolen by a cruel disease that had worn her down slowly, relentlessly. John felt his knees weaken but forced himself to stay upright. He traced the carved letters on the wooden cross, her name, dates, a simple epitaph, and a tear escaped, trailing down his weathered cheek. He didn't hear the footsteps approaching until they were almost upon him. A voice, sharp and unfamiliar, broke the stillness. "Sir, this area is closed to the public. You need to step away." John looked up, confusion mixing with pain. A young man in a police uniform stood before him, eyes wary, posture tense. John's voice trembled as he tried to explain. I'm with the family. My wife's grave is here. I was just saying goodbye." The officer's jaw tightened. "Sir, you're trespassing. The cemetery is closed." John's hands curled into fists at his sides. "I've got every right to be here. She just passed." The officer's eyes narrowed, interpreting the grief as stubbornness or defiance. "I need you to leave. Now." John's world felt like it was collapsing again. His heart pounded fiercely, but his voice cracked under the weight of exhaustion and despair. "Please don't do this. I'm not a threat." But the officer had already radioed for backup. More officers arrived, their faces impassive. The tension thickened like a storm about to break. John's hands shook, not out of anger, but from years of trauma, loss, and now unbearable grief. When John didn't move fast enough to satisfy the officer, frustration turned into force. The young cop pulled out a taser. "Comply or I'll use it." John's pleas fell on deaf ears. The sudden shock sent a burning jolt through his body. He collapsed onto the damp ground, his breath knocked out of him, his veteran pride shattered in an instant. Around him, a few witnesses gasped in horror, their murmurs swelling into outraged whispers. How could a man who had given so much be treated like a criminal in the moment he mourned? John lay there, stunned, the cold earth beneath him grounding the painful reality. He was alone, misunderstood, and betrayed at the most vulnerable time of his life. The sun rose higher, indifferent, as the world seemed to turn away from a man broken not by war, but by grief and injustice. The sudden arrival of the Marines broke through the thick tension like a wave of calm authority. They moved swiftly yet deliberately, their polished boots crunching softly on the gravel path as they closed in on the scene. The leader, Captain Miguel Sanchez, was the first to reach John Harrington, his face etched with a mixture of concern and recognition. His eyes locked on John's fallen form, and a flicker of something like brotherly protectiveness crossed his stern features. Behind Miguel, the others, men weathered by years of service, their uniforms bearing the marks of countless missions, fell into formation around John, creating a human shield between the grieving veteran and the police officers. The crowd watching from a distance fell silent, sensing the shift in power and respect. Captain Sanchez's voice cut through the murmurs, low and commanding, carrying the weight of experience and unshakable conviction. The officer Collins stepped back. "This man deserves our respect. He served this country with honor." Officer Ryan Collins hesitated, the confidence he had displayed moments ago wavering under the steady gaze of the Marines. He glanced at his taser, now hanging uselessly at his side, then back at Captain Sanchez. Around them, other officers who had arrived grew uncertain, some whispering among themselves. Miguel bent down and gently helped John to sit upright, his hands steady and kind. "You're all right, brother. We've got you. John's hands trembled as he took the offered support, his body weak but his spirit momentarily buoyed by the presence of his comrades. One of the Marines, a younger man with a close-cropped beard, spoke quietly but firmly to the police officers. This isn't just about rules or regulations. It's about dignity. About the sacrifices men like John have made. You need to remember that. Officer Collins shifted uncomfortably, his defensiveness fading. The weight of his actions became evident in his eyes, but pride kept his shoulders rigid. Captain Sanchez straightened and faced the gathering crowd, raising his voice so all could hear. What you see here is a man who has faced far worse than this moment. He's endured war, loss, and pain that most of us can't imagine. And yet today he was met with disrespect. We will not stand for that. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, voices expressing outrage and sympathy. A few bystanders stepped forward, voicing their support for John, their words like balm to his wounded heart. With a firm but respectful nod, Captain Sanchez addressed Officer Collins again. We're calling off this arrest. Let this man grieve in peace. Reluctantly, the young officer lowered his gaze and stepped back. The tension in the air dissolved, replaced by a collective sense of relief and solidarity. As the Marines helped John to his feet, their hands steady and reassuring, a subtle smile flickered across his face. For the first time since the day had begun, he felt seen, not as a trespasser, but as a brother, a veteran, a man deserving of respect. They began to walk away from the tense crowd, the men moving slowly so John could keep pace. Around them, whispers of the incident spread, planting seeds for change, justice, and healing. In this moment, amidst grief and turmoil, Brotherhood had proven stronger than fear and ignorance, a beacon of hope shining through the darkest hours. The news of John Harrington's ordeal spread through the town like wildfire, igniting conversations in coffee shops, community centers, and living rooms. The image of an elderly war veteran, vulnerable and grieving at his wife's grave, forcibly tasered by a young police officer, struck a chord deep within the hearts of many. It was a stark reminder of how easily dignity can be stripped away, even from those who had sacrificed the most. Local media outlets covered the story extensively. Video footage from witnesses, capturing the moment of the tasering and the Marines' intervention, circulated on social media, drawing thousands of views and sparking impassioned debates about law enforcement conduct and respect for veterans. Calls for accountability grew louder, and the pressure mounted on the police department to act swiftly and transparently. Within days, the department's Internal Affairs Division opened a thorough investigation. They reviewed every piece of evidence, bodycam footage, radio dispatches, and eyewitness accounts. Officer Ryan Collins was placed on administrative leave, while the department's chief publicly apologized for the excessive force used against John. In a solemn statement, the chief acknowledged that the treatment John received was unacceptable, promising comprehensive reforms focused on de-escalation tactics and sensitivity training, especially regarding interactions with veterans and grieving civilians. Meanwhile, John found himself enveloped in a wave of community support. Veterans organizations reached out, offering companionship, counseling, and invitations to events honoring those who served. Neighbors brought food, cards, and flowers to his doorstep, their kindness bridging the gap between isolation and connection. Strangers in the street would stop to shake his hand or offer a word of encouragement, reminding him that he was not forgotten. Weeks later, a memorial ceremony was organized in the cemetery near Elizabeth's grave. The event drew a diverse crowd, fellow veterans in uniform, local government officials, family members, community activists, and ordinary citizens moved by John's story. The atmosphere was heavy with emotion, a mingling of sorrow, respect, and renewed hope. When John was invited to speak, his hands trembled slightly, but his voice carried a calm strength that commanded attention. I stood there that day, heartbroken and alone, he began, his eyes misting over as they met the faces before him. I was saying goodbye to my beloved Elizabeth, and instead of peace, I was met with force and misunderstanding. It shook me to my core. He paused, gathering strength as the crowd listened intently. But in that darkest moment, I was reminded of what it truly means to be a soldier, not just to fight battles abroad, but to stand strong for each other at home. The Marines who came to my side, the community that rallied around me, they showed me that dignity, honor, and brotherhood still live on. John's gaze swept the assembly, his voice growing firmer. This experience has taught me that justice is not just a word in a book, it is an action. It is compassion in times of pain. It is standing up for those who cannot stand for themselves. And it is never too late to heal. As he stepped down, the crowd rose in a heartfelt ovation. Tears glistened on many cheeks, some veterans clasped their comrades' shoulders, sharing silent affirmations of shared struggle and resilience. The police department began implementing the promised reforms. Officers underwent rigorous training on empathy, crisis communication, and respecting the rights of vulnerable individuals. Policies were rewritten to ensure that compassion guided enforcement, especially when dealing with grieving families or those with trauma histories. John's own healing journey was slow and layered. There were still moments of raw pain, nights when the silence felt unbearable. But with each visit from fellow veterans, each message of support, and every quiet moment spent reflecting beside Elizabeth's grave, the sharp edges of grief softened. The solidarity forged in that painful afternoon became a source of strength, a testament to the enduring power of human connection. Each morning, as the sun cast warm light over the cemetery, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. He carried Elizabeth's memory with him, but also a hope that honor, justice, and brotherhood could guide a community towards a kinder, more understanding future. John's journey reminds us that even in our darkest moments, the strength of compassion, honor, and solidarity can light the way forward. Justice is more than rules, it's about respecting humanity, especially those who have given so much. Through brotherhood and community, healing is possible and hope endures. Thank you for following John's story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more stories that celebrate honor, justice, and the strength of the human spirit.